Welcome to Group 5's presentation on youth sports psychology. There's a couple things that we want you to take away from this presentation. One of which is a clear definition of youth sports psychology, how sports and sports psychology play a role in the life of youth, the effectiveness of sports psychology on the youth, and just an overall better insight into youth sports psychology as a whole.
First, we're going to start by defining what sports psychology even is. According to the American Psychological Association, sports psychology is the proficiency that uses psychological knowledge and skills to address optimal performance and well-being of athletes, developmental and social aspects of sports participation, and systemic issues associated with sports settings and organizations. So for youth sports psychology, this concept is just applied to the age group that is considered youth, such as preschool all the way through the teenage years. Sports plays a major role in lots of people's lives, whether you're an athlete or a coach or a parent of an athlete or just a spectator watching your favorite sporting event. Sports in today's society is a popular, promoted, and strongly established activity in which people of any age, social status, or different interest are engaged. A lot of people begin sports in their youth. They begin when they are able to walk, or their parents think that they are ready to engage in an activity. Sports is treated as an educational tool, shaping children and adolescents' behavior patterns and value orientations, which lay the foundations of pro-social or antisocial behavior expression not only in sports but also in other areas of social life. Sports can help bring on new friends. It can help a child get established. It can help a child be more open when maybe they were just a little timid before. Sports helps open a lot of doors for youth and children to become more active. In order to keep our youth involved, interested in certain sports, and ultimately for youth sports psychology to be effective, there are lots of moving parts that must all work cohesively together to better a child's experience. For sports psychology to be successful in youth sports, it must not only focus on the training of the athletes, but also the coaches, parents, and any other people involved in the activity. Children can gain a lot from sports as long as everyone is on the same page. As long as everyone has the child's best interest in mind, then the kids can learn so much from sports. Family members play key roles in the developmental pathway of youth athletes. Family roles usually include the necessary financial, logistic, and emotional support which gives the child the opportunity to be engaged in sport activities and to develop their physical abilities. Parents have to provide the necessities such as paying for sports, driving them to and from practices and games, and giving a level of emotional support that will help the kids develop their physical abilities for that sport. Not only in the most obvious ways are families involved, but it is said that a parent's encouragement, support, and praise increase a child's awareness of their athletic ability and have a positive impact on their interest in sports. If children know that you're interested in their sports and interested in them playing the sports, then that's going to help bring them out of their shell. And then they're going to have a better positive outlook on that sport because you are encouraging them. Through parental involvement, the chances increase for children to achieve their sporting potential, have a positive psychosocial experience, and develop a range of positive development both on and off the field. Parents being involved helps bring a child's potential to its fullest, helps bring it to the surface. It will help them become the best athlete and person that they possibly can. Youth sports psychology to have any impact on our children at all, family has to be behind them. They have to support the young athletes in all aspects. Any uninvolved or unsupportive family member could be detrimental to the youth's success, satisfaction in sports, and overall confidence as a player. If a child feels that they're annoying you by wanting to play sports or they're bothering you by going to their sporting events, that is going to drop them down a notch in their confidence as a player. Well, my parents don't want me to do it, so I guess I don't want to do it either. But if we support them, then they're going to blossom and turn into an incredible athlete. Or they
Self-esteem in youth sports is very important because self-esteem affects young people extremely. It's part of a growing up process. How do you see yourself? The definition of self-esteem is a person's overall subjective emotional evaluation of his or her own worth. It's sort of like self-efficacy. Do you feel like you can complete a task, and how well do you feel like you can complete it? How does this play a part in youth sports? Well, youth sports are often used as a way to boost a child's self-esteem. You put them in sports when they may not have that much self-esteem, they excel in the sport, and boom, their self-esteem goes up. As well as they learn from their peers, they feed off their peers. If they're doing well and their peers are doing well, that also boosts their self-esteem. If they're doing well and their peers are cheering them on, that boosts their self-esteem. Rewards from teammates, coaches, and parents, that type of praise all contributes to self-esteem. A study done on enhancing youth sports says boys with low self-esteem are more sensitive and responsive to coaches' instructive and supportive behaviors. So that just kind of sums up how self-esteem and low self-esteem especially can be affected by a coach's actions and how they treat their players through the ups and the downs. The CBAS, or Coaching Behavior Assessment System, was a proposed model that was used to test how coaches' behavior can affect youth children under their guidance. The model was composed of coaching goals, values, motives, even the sex of the coaches, how a male versus a female coach can affect a child, how the coach's motives, do they want to just win or do they want to help their team become a better team? The coach's values, do they value hard work? Do they value teamwork? Do they value player-coach teams? Like when a player helps another player when they may be struggling, so that a coach doesn't always have to be the one that's yelling. What are the coach's goals? Do they want to see their team succeed? This CBAS is the standard. It's been used a lot. It's a proposed model, and it's kind of like a baseline of how coaching behavior can ultimately affect a youth. Another baseline model that's been used often is called the Coach Effectiveness Training, also known as the CET. And right now I'm just kind of going to give a list of the do's and the don'ts on the best way to coach in game-like situations. So one of the things that you want to do when good plays happen is you want to immediately reward and encourage the player. You want to give them that immediate encouragement because they did something good. You want to reward that, just as if they did something bad, you would want to immediately correct it. What you don't want to do is take their efforts for granted. So, for instance, the play might have been a good play, but they might not have got the outcome that they wanted. For example, a basketball team may be swinging the ball and moving the zone, and they get a good shot, but the shot doesn't go in. But they did what you asked them to do. However, the outcome may not have been what you wanted, but it's still a good play. So you want to encourage them too, because you don't want to take their efforts for granted. That may make them feel bad and make them feel like they didn't do what they were supposed to do, even though they did. A second thing that happens in games are mistakes, or just things that happen because of the pressure of the game that they normally wouldn't do, maybe in practice. And what you want to do when that happens is encourage, but also correct them. You want to correct them without yelling. What you don't want to do is yell, disapprove, or put a fear into a child of making a mistake. You don't want to have the kid scared to make a mistake, because mistakes happen all the time. It's about how you respond to the mistakes. So when they make a mistake, you want to encourage them, like, it's okay, I understand what happened, but next time do this. Or just play through it. You're going to make a mistake, make it up on the opposite end of the court, for instance, or the opposite end of the field for football or soccer, anything like that. With misbehavior, it's a little bit different. Set clear expectations from the beginning so that each child knows what is expected of them throughout the process. Through practice, through games, through anything like that, you want them to know how you expect them to behave. Don't use any type of physical punishment or lose control of your group. You don't want to punish them with running or anything like that. Like, if you don't pay attention, we're going to do a suicide. No, you want them to respond immediately without having to resort to that, and you don't want them to fear you in any way. Coach effectiveness training continued, this time focusing on leading. Research supports that youth coaches using a performance-focused motivation is not conducive to development. Performance-focused motivation shifts athletes' attention on winning, public recognition, and performance to relative to others. Athletes with this focus tend to believe that talent is a native endowment as opposed to something you work for. Coaches using mastery-oriented motivation focuses development of skills relative to individualized standards. Athletes see talent as something that results from practice, more likely to persist in times of adversity and difficulty. So coaches that are more focused on conducive development will tell their players that practice makes perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect, as my coaches always used to say. And mastering your skill is how you become better, versus coaches that aren't really focused on conducive development and more performance-focused motivation will say, you did good this game, you're going to do good all the games. You don't have to really try that hard. And, some people are more athletically endowed than others, so they're just going to tell that person who's more athletically endowed that, you're going to be better than her any day of the week or better than him any day of the week. You don't really have to try, which is not always true, because at the end of the day, hard work does pay off. Another basic theory is called the SDT, or the self-determination theory. This is often used to help parents describe their parenting styles and for them to see how it can affect their child in sports. A lot of parents are very hands-on when it comes to their child being in sports, and that can sometimes affect the child negatively, and you don't want that to happen because they're living through their child, because maybe their child is a little bit better at the sport than they were when they were young. You don't want them to overpower their child. And this self-determination theory, it kind of highlights the autonomy, relatedness, and competence as key features in parenting styles, and how that can affect their child negatively or positively, and how they can change. Of course, there's some critiques on youth sports psychology, and some negative views of sports and just youth sports psychology in general are sports help develop specific aggressive traits such as bullying and domination in sports and in regular life. An example would be somebody who's very good at their sport and they may not have the best attitude all the time. They may not have a great winning attitude. They might not have a great losing attitude. They just may not be a good overall sport. However, because they are so good at the sport, nobody ever corrects that, and it carries over into school. It carries over into life, and that can be something that becomes negative from sports. Mark Hyman stated in his book, Until It Hurts, America's Obsession with Youth Sports and How It Harms Our Kids, that the adult takeover of kids' sports can negatively affect the physical and mental well-being of a child. Just like I stated in the previous slide, parents can have a negative effect on their kids with sports. They may be overly aggressive. They may pressure their kids into sports. Sometimes kids are very good at their sport, but they don't like it. They don't enjoy it. But their parents continue to put them in the sport, continue to pressure them, and they may not even like the sport that they're in. They may not be enjoying it. And a lot of times, I think parents lose focus as to what the overall goal for the sport is. You want your child to enjoy playing their sport. You don't want them to hate it, because nothing really good comes out of it. Of course, there's some positive feedback on youth sports psychology. And another thing that people have found to be true, children who participate in sports during middle and high school years often do better academically and are offered better job prospects opposed to those children who do not join sports. I find this to be true because throughout middle school and high school, I played a sport. Even now in college, I play a sport, and I get a lot of opportunities, especially job opportunities, that I never would have gotten if I didn't play a sport. I get the opportunity to coach children, babysit children, employers often feel like people who play sports are better employees because they're more disciplined because of this sport. They know how to work with all types of people who they may not have met if it wasn't for that sport. So they know how to teamwork and things like that. Another positive view of sports is sports are used to develop resiliency, teamwork skills, moral character, and other important personal strengths. Again, employers look for that type of thing. They want their new team player to be resilient. They want them to be able to work with a team. They want to know that they can trust them, moral character. So it's really important, and sports really do feed into overall a more well-rounded person. And that's why people continue to study youth sports psychology. Enhancing peer relationships through physical activity. High-quality peer relationships may translate to positive psychological and health-related outcomes. For example, being in a youth sport, you meet a lot of people. You meet new friends and possibly lifelong friends. So throughout that, it translates to positive psychological and health-related outcomes because you're learning from somebody else from another walk of life that you may not have ever met before if you didn't play that sport, like I said previously. And also, you get to relate to somebody on the same level that you are in. You get to relate to somebody who's also going through what you're going through simultaneously. You guys are both in practice together, things of that nature. And physical activity can also have a positive health, mental, and emotional related outcomes. Sometimes you're having a bad day and you know what? You look forward to practice. You get to let off some steam. Another thing is development of effective and efficient ways to use physical activity, context to promote peer relationships. And that's basically just saying it helps to enhance peer relationships through supportive actions. You miss a shot and your teammate pats you on the back and you're like, hey, next one's going to go in. And you feel much better about yourself than you would if you were doing that by yourself. Thank you for watching. I hope you learned everything and more that you needed and wanted to learn about youth sports psychology and how relationships with coaches, players, and parents can all affect a child who plays a sport, and how peer relationships can help enhance that. Thank you.